This episode is brought to you by Resy and American Express. Resy is a digital platform that connects restaurants to restaurant lovers by elevating dining experiences, providing original industry content, and helping to fill some of the country's most exciting dining rooms. Because restaurants have always been more than just places to eat. The amazing world of restaurants is just a few taps away in the Resy app and at resy.com.
The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
We also don't publish a lot of American food writers either. And that's a conscious decision, not because we don't love them, but because, we really want to offer something that feels different to, the wider ecosystem of American food writing that's out there. And I think Americans respond quite well to that as well. I think they can tell that every article isn't sort of made for them.
This is Taste. I'm your host, Eliza Barbanel. Jonathan Nunn is the London-based founder and co-editor of Vittles, a food and culture newsletter based in the UK and India. Vittles is a singular source for incisive writing about contemporary food culture, from deep dives to restaurant reviews. And it's a pleasure to have Jonathan in the studio to talk about what's shaping their ever-growing coverage.
And at the top of the show, it's the return of Three Things, where Eliza and I talk about what is exciting us in the world of restaurants, cookbooks, and the food world as a whole. Eliza, we're back with Three Things. How are you doing?
I'm good, Matt. How are you?
I'm great. Do you want to start with your first of three things?
Do I want to start? Yeah, I can start.
Okay.
My first thing is that I finally went to Elbow Bakery, which is Zoe Kanan's bakery down Lower East Side. Have you been before?
I have been. It was mile 11 of Clayton and I running the New York City Bakery Half Marathon.
Sorry, how have you been? Have you had a transcendental life experience at Elbow Bakery?
No, I haven't actually been. I've sat outside and tried to drink water and basically was sweating the whole time. So.
Yeah. Well, I went in a much less intense context, which was just to grab some pastries, and I have been, kicking myself that I hadn't gone sooner because I really loved it. And the two best things that I had that I want to talk about are, number one, the potato knish, which I think is like the perfect size for a knish. It's not, I'm like gesturing wildly in the studio right now. I would say it's like the size of the palm of your hand, maybe, as opposed to like the volleyball-sized knish you would maybe get elsewhere on the Lower East Side. And the ratio of filling, which is this really beautiful kind of like dilly, oniony potato filling, almost like a chicken soup kind of flavor to the exterior, is really great. And then the other thing I got, which is what I've been kind of lusting after online, is this sandwich that they do. It's the only sandwich they do, I believe. It's dark rye bread, cream cheese, and walnut feuilletine, which is basically little crispy crepes that are mixed in with this walnut butter. So you have this kind of creamy, slightly crunchy sandwich. Super good.
Super good. We had pretzels there, the sweet potato pretzel. That was incredible. And I need to go actually have a proper visit.
Seek out the sandwich, I would say.
Yeah.
It's kind of an unusual sandwich. I've never had anything like it before.
And I like the rethinking of the size of the knish because I agree it's always been like a no-go for me because it's just too big and a little starchy. So.
Yeah, it was great. What's your first thing?
My first thing is I went to another Kingston restaurant that I want to shout out because I'm on a roll up there. I just love visiting it. I've said enough about Kingston probably because it's one of New York's finest food cities. I went to Ang's restaurant, which to me is a little personal. My great colleague here, Jen Sitt, she's an editor at Clarkson Potter, edits many of the cookbooks we talk about on the show. It's her father's restaurant, her family's restaurant. Her father is Tom Sitt, and he's been operating this restaurant since the 70s, but the restaurant's been running in Kingston since 1927, and it is first off, aesthetically, it's an incredible place. It's like a preserved mid-century Chinese American restaurant. Carpet, really cozy booths, big banquettes in the back or banquet tables, and it was so kind of pitch perfect in that vibe that it was the home to a very memorable scene from last season of Severance. They filmed there and they made it one of the restaurants. But really, the food to me is what stood out, and it's really, really good. We ordered this amazing poo-poo platter, this giant with a flame in the middle. It was they're pulling out all the stops. It had fried chicken, which was perfectly fried, tangy Chinese spare ribs, fried shrimp, and some other things, an egg roll in there. Loved that. I love the Singapore chow mein fun noodles, and they do a Tropicana shrimp, which I can only describe as fried shrimp in creamsicle form. There's like orange and cream there. My table mates absolutely loved it. Maybe not my dish of choice, but they loved it. Tom is in his early 80s and walking the floor and cooking every day. And I think, first off, just the food is great, and you should visit in Kingston. It's Ang's.
Yeah, it's been on my list for a while, so I'm really
You
glad
should
to
go.
hear you had a good meal
You'll
there.
dig it. Absolutely. What's your next thing?
I'm going to shout out just what I think is the perfect like big group dinner occasion restaurant that I went to, which is Russian Samovar.
Oh, cool.
Very close to the Penguin Random House offices.
It is.
Which I think it would take a lot for me to commute up to Midtown like on a weekend night. But I
Yeah.
was doing a special celebration for a friend who's getting married, and it was like such a fun occasion. The reason why we went specifically is that on the weekends at I believe like 9:30, they have live music with like Russian folk dancing, and my fabulous Russian hairdresser Starlina goes there all the time, and she always is telling me about it. So I said, this is the perfect moment. We got a big table. First of all, the music and the dancing is like such a high level of performance, and I actually emerged like from the bathroom as it was starting, and it was
cool.
quite a lot to walk into, but great time. Definitely bring tips for that. But also the food was really good and
Nice.
kind of like better than I almost thought it was going to be. We had really good pickles. We had really good pelmeni. Obviously, sour cherry vodka. They do infused vodka in all these different flavors.
Yum.
The horseradish vodka, Starlina said we had to get. It was a lot, I would say. It was really like, if you think normal vodka is fiery, horseradish vodka is even more so. But even like the chicken Kiev that we got, it was all so delicious. And I just think if you happen to be uptown, or if
Yeah.
you want to do like a proper New York night, go on the weekend, come for the music, stay for the sour cherry vodka.
I love that, Rack. Did you have a whole full bottle on the table?
Well, yeah, you buy like it's not a liter, but it's like a carafe, I would say.
Right.
I do think it is watered down just based on the amount, to be frank, the amount of vodka that I drank to how I felt. Like I think I would have been on the floor if it was not watered down, but
Yeah.
it definitely has a lot going for
Has
it
a lot
still.
going for it.
And this is such an iconic restaurant. It was taken over in 1986, and Mikhail Baryshnikov is one of the owners of the restaurant.
No
They
way.
shot all of the like Sex in the City scenes when he was dating Carrie Bradshaw there. Even before that, it was this like celebrity hotspot in the 60s called Jilly's Canteen. So it really does feel like you're kind of going back in time.
I've never been. I've always wanted to.
Oh,
Great
we're
Rack.
right here.
It's
so
right here.
We'll
Little
get some
happy hour vodka.
some pelmeni.
Yeah. My next thing is I was prepping for my great conversation with Hetty McKinnon, which will air in a few weeks. And I was doing my prep. I was checking out some videos, and I came across this video for this from the New York Times for this salad that kind of went viral. We talked about it in the episode. I had to make it at home. I love this salad. And I think in the video, Hetty says some people are making it 3 to 4 days a week, and I absolutely believe it, like no bullshit. So here's the salad. It's basically tomatoes. Like you can mix like cherry and basically any tomatoes. And this is kind of a good late summer, early fall, because we still have tomatoes for a good month. And season with salt and let it sit for a bit. And you make this vinaigrette with chili crisp as the base. And you pick the chili crisp you want to eat. So you pick your heat level. It's really up to you. Rice vinegar and some soy sauce and a little bit of sesame oil. And you have that ready. And then you make some dumplings. Mm-hmm. You make some dumplings, any way you want. You can steam them, you can fry them, pot stickers, you can fry them. I did that. And you marry these components. It's a cold or room temperature tomato salad, actually. Keep it room temp. And you add the dumplings to it, and you add this wonderful vinaigrette, toss it up, serve it hot. And the heat does something. It really, it kind of instantly, saturates the tomatoes with the chili crisp, because it kind of just like basically puts it in lightning speed for marination. It's really good. And it's kind of the perfect meal. And it made me realize how much I hate panzanella. Panzanella is such a waste. Like, no one wants to eat like soggy bread. You don't want to put great bread in panzanella. Like, it's just not for me. And I just don't like soggy bread. But I want more than like just a tomato salad. Tomato salads can be like too much acid. Just a lot going on. You only want a few bites. But when you add the dumplings, it's like I can eat like a full tomato with that dumpling, and it's beautiful.
I knew you were going to talk about the dumpling tomato salad when you started down this path, because I think it's one of Hetty's most prominent examples. I think all of her salads are so great, and I'm excited to hear the episode.
I'm new to it. I'm admitting my newness, and really, Linger is just a wonderful cookbook. I have it now. It's on my kitchen counter, and it's one of my favorites from the recipe point of view of the season. It's great.
I love that, and I can't wait to listen to your episode. My last thing that I'm going to talk about today is a really great new soy sauce that I got to try. It's a new soy sauce brand from Clarissa Wei, the fantastic cookbook author who, when I met her in Taiwan earlier this year, she told me that they were kind of working on developing this soy sauce. It's a single origin, traditionally fermented black soybean soy sauce brand, and it's called Heido. And it is using specifically the number 5 black soybeans from Tainan, which I believe she went on like a whole excursion to find the best possible soybeans for this application. But they do this one soy sauce that she calls like silky finishing soy sauce. It's brewed twice. So first in salt water and then in soy sauce. And it has this really like dashi, like caramel. There's a little bit of cane sugar in there, but like less sodium than a traditional soy sauce. It's like a drizzling kind of finishing soy sauce. And she just sent me a bottle, which is awesome. And I've been using it at home, just kind of like, for dipping. You could even just pour it over rice. It has like a really just incredible flavor. They also are doing a more kind of workhorse everyday soy sauce, which I think is cool. But I think they're kind of starting to roll out distribution here in the U.S. They sell online, but also they have a great kind of roster of stores, certainly here in New York and like elsewhere across the country. And
can we put a link in the show notes to buy it?
We'll definitely link to it in the show notes.
Great.
And it's called Heido.
Heido. I love not all soy sauces created equally, and to have Clarissa doing one is really, really cool to see.
Yeah, and I think her team is great, and it's just kind of fun to see single origin being at the forefront. I think you can really actually like understand like the full expression of flavor when it has that kind of specificity in terms of where it's coming from.
Love that. My last thing is a short RIP to Marion Burroughs. I think Marion is somebody I always wanted to have on the podcast. I know her health was declining in recent years and it couldn't happen. And I think many folks have written about her incredible plum tort, which is a recipe she published in the New York Times in the 80s and is the New York Times' most popular recipe. And it's terrific. I actually made it this weekend. But really, I wanted to talk about her because she was an incredible journalist. She reported and was a staff writer and editor at the New York Times and Washington Post. And Marion was somebody who really had journalism ethics at the core of her work. She was famously involved in an investigation about a bread company that was basically incorporating wood shavings into the bread, and was able to report on this misdeed, and what caused obviously a big uproar. And it was like one of the first major food investigations in a major newspaper, and that's her legacy. I think also important to note is her association with AFJ, the Association of Food Journalists, which was a great organization that sadly folded in 2020. And this organization published a code of ethics, and I'm going to link to in the show notes. It's worth checking out. And I just think that Marion is somebody who we should remember beyond this single recipe, the plum tart, as great as it is. She was one of our finest journalists, and rest in peace, Marion.
Yeah, I think what an incredible legacy. I'm thinking a little bit about my interview with Rosie Grant that I just did about her Ghostly Archive, which is a project that's kind of enshrining recipes that are carved onto gravestones. And I don't necessarily think that's the case with Marion, but I think like what incredible legacy to have a recipe that so many people know. And I, also enjoy cooking every year. So thank you for mentioning her.
Thanks for sharing your 3 things.
Yeah, you too.
Today's episode of This Is Taste is brought to you by Grow Therapy. Have you ever tried to Google therapist near me and ended up more anxious than when you started? Yeah, same. For real, I once spent 2 hours scrolling potential therapists. I started checking their LinkedIns. I started checking their Instagram profiles, all that background information. And you know what? I did not end up with a therapist at the end of this deep dive. I knew too much. Grow Therapy makes it way less overwhelming and way more affordable. Whether it's your first time in therapy or your 50th, Grow makes it easier to find a therapist who fits your needs. They connect you with thousands of independent, licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. It's that easy. And you can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. And if something comes up, you can cancel up to 24 hours in advance at no cost. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your own time. Whatever challenges you're facing, Grow Therapy is here to help. Sessions average about $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0, depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/taste today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/taste. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
Jonathan Nunn, this is Taste. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
A pleasure. Thank you for having me.
I'm very delighted to have you here. I love Vittles and talk about it all the time, so it's a treat to get to talk about it with the person behind it. Before we get into that, I think every New Yorker wants to know when people visit what they think of New York as a food city. I'm curious if you have had any good meals here or if you think there's anything that New York does especially well when it comes to food.
So last time I was here was a year ago, and I came back from being here kind of quite down on New York. And I was just thinking, God, it's like London, but just harder, a harder city to exist in. And I don't think I ate amazingly well. And I was wondering about this at the time because I think the first time I went to New York was 2015. And, I must have been 25 and, just suddenly being in the city where all these things that you've heard about for so long, suddenly exist. And so I was going, as soon as I got off, it was Momofuku Sam and then Milk Bar and then Katz's and so on. And, everything was great. And then last year, I just felt I'd seen everything. And, it's a consequence of London and New York becoming so close to each other. And then this time around, I've just been bowled over again. And I do actually think it is as simple as the weather. It's I'm just an animal. And February, everything was grey and I couldn't be able to be outside. And then I'm here at the sort of tail end of sort of summer turning into autumn. And it's beautiful. And I've eaten really well. S&P again, which, I'm quite glad doesn't exist in London. Something in some sense, I would love something like that. But in another sense, I want to come to New York and feel like it's a foreign city.
Yeah.
And, we just can't do that line cooking. There's nothing close to it in London. And so that's a place that I love to come to.
I love their tuna melt. It's my favorite.
Tuna melt is fantastic. Everything I've had there has been sort of exactly as you would want it to be. Mm-hmm. I went to the Bronx to get lechon the other day. We were staying in Flushing, which I've always wanted to stay in because every time I come to New York and go to Jackson Heights and Flushing, you have to think about getting back. And so this was just nice being there.
I love Flushing. I think that's my most favorite food neighborhood to go to in the city, probably.
Yeah. So just off the plane, go to Maxie's Noodles, which is just nice to have straight off the plane. I feel there's restaurants and bars where whenever I bring them up to a New Yorker, they're just I love that place. And no dissension. I think it's S&P, Maxie's Noodles, Long Island bar.
The best.
Yeah, just
Well,
everyone loves them.
I think the burgers, I think it could be better at, at Long Island Bar, but I go there all the time because it has like the whole dining experience that you want to have. The booth, the drinks, all of that.
But for me, it's not necessarily the food. It's the bar aspect of it, which
Yeah.
is something that we don't do as well in London. Like we have great bars, but they tend to be, at the high end. So you're talking about like places like Duke's in Mayfair, where they, have like a insanely strong martini, but it has a dress code, or they tend to be like quite avant-garde and uncomfortable. Whereas this is just like a very comfortable bar serving reasonably priced drinks, and like it's just a place that you want to be, and that's something we don't have enough of.
And I think you might know this, but maybe someone listening doesn't. The bar director of Long Island Bar was the bar director at the Odeon in the 80s and invented the Cosmopolitan. And they do really good Cosmopolitans at the Long Island Bar. And they do in the summer a frozen Cosmo, which I don't know if you've had that before, but I think it's actually the greatest frozen drink.
I didn't have it, but I came in when Ruby was having the tail end of it, but I didn't get to try it.
It's very like tart, and I think most frozen drinks I love the idea of, but about halfway through it just gets way too sweet for me, so it's kind of a perfect one. Okay, I'm glad to know that you had some good New York meals, because now I want to talk a lot about London. And I guess on the other side of things, on the London side, like, what do you think makes London a great food city?
I mean, it's pretty much the same as what makes New York a great food city, which is variety. It's one of the great diasporic food cities of the world. And, the confluence of, that unique immigration pattern and then history and geography. Like we, since the late 80s, we've been, very lucky to have this kind of renaissance in British food, chefs looking to our history and to, native ingredients and to what we do well, and a kind of concurrent revolution in produce, which has really changed the way that we eat at every level, but, especially at the restaurant level. We're blessed with having a lot of great produce, but also we're, in a position between, geographically between Europe and America. And, we're constantly looking to New York on one side for inspiration. And, on the other, we're so close to Europe. So we have access to European produce, access to great wine. There's been a fantastic renaissance in wine bars over the last sort of 15 years or so. And, we have variety at kind of every level. So if you want fine dining, we can do, great fine dining. But for me, like the marrow of London is in its smaller restaurants and, particularly in its outer boroughs. I guess Vittles is in some sense, at least the restaurant aspect of it, feels to me like trying to connect those two worlds, which I really love in London, which is, I guess, like the scene of restaurants, and also, it's diaspora restaurants as well, which I always feel should be in better communion with each other.
Yeah, I think totally as a reader of Vittles, that's the perspective that I see embodied in it. I'm wondering, maybe for a listener who's unfamiliar, hasn't read Vittles before, could you speak a little bit to like the larger editorial vision point of view that you think plays out in the newsletter?
Yeah, so we're a small team where it's me and four other editors, Rebecca May Johnson, Sharanya Deepak, Adam Coughlin, and Oren O'Donoghue. And, we all have sort of like different interests and different remits within the publication. I think some people, when they hear like the word Vittles, they're thinking of something very specific. Sometimes it's restaurants. I think particularly for people in London, it's restaurants. But I think for other people, it's, the wider work that we do. So we're a food and culture publication, but we pretty much publish everything. So everything from, long reads, from reporting, personal essays, recipes, restaurants, and, our restaurant, vertical is very much dedicated to covering London and to cover London in the most expansive way that we can. But, outside of that, our remit is really anything that we're interested in. For us, that has to be the bottom line, that we're really interested in it. And we also have, a strange relationship with American media because, we're so influenced by it. You can't not be influenced by American media in Britain. And, inspired by it, but also we really want to have a sensibility that is not American, that really feels unique to us. So I think it's a mixture of a British sensibility, but also a South Asian sensibility. Sharanya is based in Delhi. I have a South Asian background. We also don't publish a lot of American food writers either. And that's a conscious decision, not because we don't love them, but because, we really want to offer something that feels different to, the wider ecosystem of American food writing that's out there. And I think Americans respond quite well to that as well. I think they can tell that every article isn't sort of made for them or geared towards them.
Yeah, I think you're trying to fill a gap that exists in the UK as well. Certainly I think media around the world and in the United States is not being funded or supported in the ways that it ought to. But, Eater doesn't exist in London anymore. The larger landscape of food writing in the UK is different than it is here in the US. I think that maybe Americans being told this actually isn't for you, there's something perverse about that we actually enjoy.
I think so. I think every time I talk to Americans about food media, American food writers, I think they can be quite down about it, which I think is completely fair and right. However, with British food media, imagine that, but 10 times worse. And kind of with very little redeeming features. I don't know if a Vittles could work in America. I'd like to hope that it could. A publication coming along with the same kind of remit, or an independent publication covering New York. But we came around at the right time. We came around at a time when there was really a hole within the British food media ecosystem. We've been trying to fill it for the last 5 years, I guess.
Yeah, I want to dig into some examples of stories that you think maybe have a good encapsulation of what Vittles does well. I think to me it really is great writing no matter the form, but there is a kind of difference between the kind of servicey lists that you do. I think one of the ones that went quite viral was, I don't know the number, a certain number of places to eat in central London that aren't Pret. And then you also do these kinds of more deeply reported feature writing, personal essays. What's a story that you've published recently that you think you enjoy and that is really classic Vittles?
I think actually the two projects that we've published recently, one was a project about food and children, which Rebecca mainly edited and kind of spearheaded. And the other one was the recent guide we did to Paris, which came out 2 weeks ago. And I think they're both kind of emblematic of what we do in terms of, the range of sort of voices and sort of styles of writing contained within them. But also the Paris project is, I think, very much classically what we do. It's, a city guide trying to cover Paris in the most expansive way possible that we would try to do with London. And so, we've got everything from covering university canteens to covering Rungis, the huge wholesale market, which is just outside of the city proper. We've got a great long read on the death of French restaurant criticism, which is something that I've wanted to know for a very long time. Kind of what is, food media is so Anglophone. And, I think for most, even for, me as a kind of plugged in, reader of food media, I don't really know what's happening in Paris in terms of its food media. So that was a really fascinating fascinating thing to come across. Learned that like food restaurant criticism in France was rooted in the aftermath of the Nazi-aligned Vichy government, because all the journalists who like supported the Vichy government and collaborated with the Nazis, were banned from journalism afterwards, except in the food and travel sections, because they thought it was not political. So you had all these like far right people move into food media in like a big way, which is not dissimilar to the situation in Britain. But so that's like sort of classically what we do. But then the kids project, I think, is something that we could not have done 3-4 years ago. It was a really different way of looking at things, and certainly in terms of Vittles monetizes mainly through its restaurant coverage. In terms of the restaurant coverage that we chose to do with that, it was really like not about, I think when I write about restaurants, I can get really, really obsessive and like trying to find something that I really love personally. And I'm often looking for something very particular. I'm not really thinking about, that much about whether anyone else will like it. I'm often thinking about like, do I like it? And if I like it, then I think other people will as well. But with the kids guide, it was really like just going back to, what do people need? Like, what do most people with kids need? They're not looking to go to a Zone 5, Zone 6 restaurant. They're not looking for a place which is uncomfortable. They're looking for certain things, surrounding children, whether it's, types of menus, whether it's like the attitude of staff, whether it's accessibility, or just like somewhere that's comfortable, somewhere that gives them dignity. So that was like a really different way of us working. And that's something that, Rebecca, really spearheaded. And I feel like we couldn't have done that.
Yeah, I think there's a really, like, the commonality between those is a level of thoughtfulness and care in terms of like what is the specific way that you want to make this project, like who is it really serving. I'm curious if you think about like who is the Vittles audience, like is it a monolith, are they different kinds of people, and how much of the work that you're doing is specifically trying to serve them versus what you said about chasing something that you're personally interested in writing about.
It's really surprisingly varied. I think when I started, I had in mind that the Vittles reader was probably a Londoner in their 30s.
That's what I would probably guess also.
Yeah, and it turns out it's not really that true. Like one thing which really like heartens me whenever I hear it is when I hear about people's parents or grandparents being obsessed with Vittles. Because I think, when it comes to like food and food media, it's so wrapped up in, aspiration, like where, people think is cool. Lots of things which don't particularly interest me. But I think, we certainly do have a readership in our restaurant coverage, which, is certainly like aligned with that. Like, they're reading us to find out like, where they should be eating. But I find with that older generation, they don't give a shit. Like they just, they're just reading it because they find it interesting, and they don't have that sense of like aspirationism about, where they want to eat or what type of writing they want to read. They're reading it because they find the content really fascinating. So I really love it when I hear about older people reading Vittles. And, we have, I think 25% of our readership is in America, which is quite substantial. So we have, I think, there is no archetype of a Vittles reader, which is quite pleasing to me.
Yeah, I think that must feel kind of freeing in some kind of way, because you don't have to be overly thinking about who is the base, what are they served by. If you've been able to build a big tent, then you can keep on doing all kinds of stories and hope that tent kind of keeps expanding.
Yeah, I think the only way we know how to work is to just keep commissioning stories that we are personally interested in, without having to worry too much about, issues of like timeliness and, tying it into certain things. you know, in some sense it's, maybe we'll get into this later, but you know, some sense I worry about it because we're not so reactive as a publication. And it sometimes means that we can be a bit slow or like, you know, not be reacting to the moment as much as we could do. But on the other side of things, I think it makes the articles we publish a little bit more sort of timeless.
Is there something that happened recently that you were like, oh, I wish we had been able to respond to this more quickly?
I mean, there's so many trends going on in London. You know, things like, and they're going on in New York as well, you know, things like the massive resurgence, or not even a resurgence, just the surgence in matcha, which is something that fascinates me because I come from a tea background. And I've been kind of waiting for this my entire life. I edit more than I write now, but you know, if I've been writing, that'd be the kind of perfect thing for me to tackle.
Right.
But I just haven't been able to. Or, you know, the rise in Dubai chocolate, which is also a London story as well. It's my understanding that one of the kind of inventors is a Londoner. But, you know, those kind of things, you know, because of like the timescales we're working on, by the time the article comes out, it's, you know, who knows what is going to be big in London by the time I return from holiday.
Right.
You have to be very quick to get that your take in, I think.
I guess my stance is it helps to be the first person to write about something, but if you have something different to say with maybe more historical context or social context or just your own point of view, like you've built Vittles kind of in your own image, and I think there are readers who just want to know what Jonathan has to say about matcha or Dubai chocolate or something. So I guess maybe selfishly, I'm part of the 25% of American readers who would want to read your take on that. But I think some trends do stick around also. Like we don't wear kale sweatshirts anymore, but kale is still in restaurants.
But this is like one of the things I've been thinking about a lot, because I don't think, you know, in an age of social media, in an age of like video content, like no one can ever be the first to cover a restaurant. You know, even if you're just as quick as possible off the mark, the time it takes to write something, like someone would have beaten you to like putting on video. So whenever I write review, I'm never thinking about like being first or even being quick in a way that maybe I used to sort of 5 years ago, but trying to write the thing that explains the moment that this restaurant has opened into, which is a much more difficult and slower thing to do. But, you know, as you said, it can be really, it can be a positive sometimes. Like we did a piece recently called White People Spicy, which was commissioned a long time ago because it was reacting to something that happened in Denmark, with Denmark banning buldak ramen for being too spicy. And it got loads of coverage at the time, and like most of the coverage was very funny. And kind of like, you know, it writes itself, like, you know, the Danes can't take spice.
Right.
And, you know, they've had to ban packet noodles. And while that coverage was very funny, like none of it really got into like, well, what is actually going on here?
Right.
Like, who makes the decision about banning these type of things? Like, is there such thing as like, you know, a item which could be too spicy for like for humans to eat it? And, you know, who's making these decisions? Is there a regulatory body? You know, has there been an increase in food items getting banned for being too spicy? And so the article was all about that.
Yeah.
And, you know, in the end, it was just a much richer article for having taken that time and not reacting immediately to that story.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that piece. And again, maybe this is because of the like global reach of Vittles, but I don't think the like news about Denmark banning this Korean ramen like made it here, or at least I didn't know about it. So when I was reading that, that was kind of new to me. And I think also this idea of like how are cuisines, ingredients regulated across cultures, like it was just such a fascinating topic, especially because, you know, here in New York, we have like these hot sauce stores that sell like ghost pepper hot sauce that's like definitely I don't even know, 20 times as spicy as whatever that ramen was. And I think there's parallels with like Panera that was making the like energy drink lemonade that killed someone. Like I think there have been a lot of like questions of regulation around stimulants or substances in food, but the kind of larger question of like, how do these ingredients make it to different places? How are they consumed by the culture? And then how are kind of things like intervening in that? Like that kind of summary of topics was new to me.
Yeah, and I think in many ways it's like a kind of classic example of what we're looking for when we sort of commission a story is for one, the most surprising take on that story that hasn't just been hashed out, very quickly, but also, how food plays into this confluence of these massive forces going on around us, whether it's economics, migration, regulatory bodies. I would love to more articles on regulation and try and make it interesting. Just because these are the forces that shape the way we eat. It's always the unromantic stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk about restaurant writing a little bit more because I know that that's something that you must often be thinking about and doing research for. I know we were saying that it's kind of hard to be the first, but like, will you go cover a restaurant if it's been covered in the more like mainstream media already?
Increasingly, yes. Increasingly, I want to change the view that people have of what we cover, or the assumption that we only cover a certain type of restaurant. And when I started writing, which was only about 7 years ago, I started writing for Eater. I was mainly writing to cover what I felt was a huge hole in British media coverage. And as I keep writing, I think the writing has moved away from that kind of, antagonistic aspect of it to to be a counterbalance to what's going on and to simply be like, what am I interested in? Like, no matter what. And as that has happened, like certainly over the last year, I think our coverage has shifted to still covering like diaspora restaurants within London, but also covering what is going on in the scene and trying to really explain what's going on as well. Because, we have as ludicrous a restaurant scene as New York does. And, we're whims to trends, and Carbona's just opened in London. And of course, everyone has rushed out to review it.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we will review it because I actually think it's a bit like, kicking a puppy at this point.
Too obvious.
Everyone's going to do it and everyone's going to hate it.
What if you love it, Jonathan?
Well, I mean, maybe this would be the fun.
Yeah, I know.
The fun take to do.
I know some like very bold name food people here in New York who like unironically love Carbone. So it could be possible that you would feel that way too. But I've never eaten there, so I wouldn't know.
But one thing that interests me actually is that fine dining has completely vanished from food coverage, like the real high end of fine dining.
Yeah.
So the 2, the 3 Michelin stars. And I don't know if I will, but it'd be kind of funny for Vittles to be the only place covering it.
I mean, I think that's a real service that is lacking because especially like, I don't know, if you're talking about the cost of going to a restaurant, not just paying for the meal, but getting the reservation, getting yourself there, that whole element. Like there's so much more at stake for a diner at a 2-3 star tasting menu restaurant than a quicker meal. So I think it actually is more useful to be helping people understand if this is something that they're actually interested in or is like quote unquote worth it.
Yeah, and Ruth Reichel came to the Times with the express aim of bringing down that veil on fine dining. Like, how does this world work? And, 20, 30 years on, in some sense, maybe that kind of coverage is needed. Like, I think British restaurant criticism is very, very combative, very, mocking, like very skeptical of, of fine dining. And like most of the time with good reason. But it's very much satire for people who are never going to go to that restaurant, or people who never even think of going to that restaurant. It's kind of, look what's going on in here.
Yeah.
In like, these rich London restaurants, which you'll never go to. But I also think it's interesting to take these restaurants seriously and think about, well, what are they actually doing? One of my big problems with fine dining restaurants is that I, with a very few exceptions, fundamentally do not believe that the chefs want to be cooking that type of food. Certainly lots of the fine dining that I've had in London.
Yeah.
But then you come across, every now and then like a 2 or 3 star where, you fully believe that. Like, it feels like it really is an expression of what the chef wants to cook and not what the chef believes Michelin wants them to cook. And at that point, I think it becomes special.
Yeah.
But that's a thing that unites all kind of good food, I think. Is the chef like able to, in an unmediated way, cook the food that they really want to cook without all these things interfering with it?
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso and Samra Origins by the Weekend Coffee Collection.
Introducing Samra Origins. My collaboration with Nespresso is a connection to my roots, to my mother, Samra. Coffee that hits the right notes. It transports you. Crafted with unique notes and bold, soaring flavors. Experience a taste that moves you. Nespresso and Samra Origins.
Discover more at Nespresso.com.
Dripping in gold? That's cool. Dripping in Velveeta's supremely creamy golden cheesiness? That's respect. Elevate your drip with Velveeta's range of outrageously delicious dips and dishes. Shells, cheese, melty blocks, and heat and eat queso that go all in on indulgence. Flex on your fam with a creamy, cheesy masterpiece and go all in on what you love with Velveeta. Respect the drip and satisfy your cravings. Bring home the drip with Velveeta.
How do you approach dining? Like, are you kind of always researching, or do you ever get to just go to a place you go to all the time and turn off that part of your brain?
I'm never not on.
Okay.
Which is frustrating. And it's even on this trip I'm on.
Yeah.
In some sense.
Are you taking mental notes, real notes?
I never take real notes. I think like anything important that you have to say about the restaurant will survive. I think you'll remember it. I think Jonathan Gold said something like, "Would you take notes during sex?" It's like it's a visceral, like physical thing.
Yeah,
and you remember the important things, and if you don't remember it, it probably wasn't important in the first place. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, like everything is content. Like in my life, everything I eat, has the possibility of being content. So it's very difficult to turn that off. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I research a lot. Increasingly, I've moved from kind of physical research, by which I mean like heroic eating, which is I can't do anymore for various reasons, many of which have to do with health. But I can't do that eating where, start at one place, go on to another, go on to another, go on to another, and like have that comparative eating, which was very useful for me in the beginning because it really helps kind of sharpen your own sense of taste,
right?
And what you really love and why you love it or why you don't love it. And I think you need that kind of bedrock of eating. But now I do a lot of like written research, and I will do a lot of research pre going to a restaurant before, just because I can't do that type of eating anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great to mention Jonathan Gold because he obviously is a huge forebearer for food media in general, and I think certainly your point of view in Vittles, and he certainly later on had scouts, right, who would go to restaurants and kind of report back to him. Do you have like a formal or informal version of that?
Not really. I've wondered if I should like do it. I think what I would rather do is for those people to just write for Vittles, which is having the publication is just a nicer way of doing it, rather than people coming to me to write it up. So our restaurant coverage as well, has really blossomed from being just me to being a whole group of people, across London who want to write about food. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, there's a kind of constellation of restaurant writers.
Yeah.
But I'd rather do it that way.
I mean, that's the benefit of being an editor of a publication as opposed to just a restaurant critic, right?
Yes.
Like you have the bench to share with people.
Exactly.
Do you ever decide to gatekeep a restaurant?
As a general rule, I don't particularly believe in gatekeeping. Simply because, of course there's a lot of interesting tension between who operates the restaurant, who the restaurant is aimed for, or who the first kind of customers of the restaurant are. New customers, whether a restaurant can keep up their quality or, keep up their mental health with an influx of new customers. But every restaurant I've ever written about at length, I have gone to them and asked them, like, I am writing about you. Here's our, this is how many people read us. If you agree to being written about, then you may start to get, an influx of new people who wouldn't have necessarily come before, coming to the restaurant. Like, are you okay with this? And knowing that if they say no, I will just have to pull the review. And no one has ever said no. And I do just think that most food businesses are there to make money. They're there to find a customer base. And with very few exceptions, they will all say yes. I think there are a couple places I haven't written about just because I do think they would really struggle. I've made the decision. I do just think they'd really struggle to keep up with an influx of new people. One of the ones I almost didn't write about until I talked to them was a place called Come Back In, which is in King's Cross. And it's just these Hong Kong students who have a tea room in an art gallery, and in the basement they have a restaurant. And they'd been operating by delivery as a dark kitchen for a few months, which is how I found out about the menu. And then they kind of opened secretly, and I went in the first few weeks, and the restaurant was so new you could smell the plaster on it. They had just one chef, even with one table in the restaurant, service was slow. And I waited, and so I went again, and it was a bit better that time. And then I got talking to them, and I couldn't work out before talking to them whether they wanted it to remain a secret, whether they wanted it to remain a thing between friends, which would all be completely fair enough.
Yeah.
But it turned out their whole thing was they wanted to share it with people, and people, because of the way they'd advertised, because of where it was, people didn't know it was a restaurant and they weren't coming in. So it was the opposite of what I thought. They actually were looking for new business, and they were looking to share the food with as many people as possible. So I ended up writing about it. But even then, you have to write about it in a responsible way. I think hidden gem culture is so pervasive on Instagram. And here was an example of an actual kind of hidden restaurant. But you can't start this off by saying, this is the most hidden restaurant in London. This is the best Cantonese food you'll ever have. It kind of has to be realistic and fair to the restaurant. And that is something you can still do in writing. I think it's very difficult to do that kind of nuance in video because you're competing with so many people. Everything has to be the most something.
Yeah, and you have such little time, and you are kind of at a mercy to the algorithm in a different kind of way. I love even hearing that you're calling and getting permission, because I think that there's just an element of getting permission from people that's been lost with social media. Especially walking around New York, you're just getting in the background of people's videos all the time. People are running up to you on the street. People are recording in restaurants. And I think about, Shopsins here in New York, back in the day, their original restaurant. the family did not want press. The press would call and they would hang up the phone on them. Like they were like, we have our regulars, we have enough, like we don't want more. And I remember reading Tamar Shopson's memoir and like hearing about that. And it was such a foreign concept that a restaurant would be like, we don't want press. I think it's such a hard industry, especially with rent in London and New York today, especially with all the level of competition with hype, that I think a lot of people just assume, well, this is something that they must want. But I think it is still a social contract that you're entering into.
I think also the way that hype operates in the social media age is actually so different to, how it used to with press. Like, even like the most powerful paper in the UK has a set circulation, it has a set readership. You could be covered in the Times and, it would still only reach, a certain number of people, which as the editor, what type of people they are, where they're located. What Instagram does and TikTok does, with algorithms that are tailored to individually towards people, is that if a video hits the algorithm right, there's no upper limit to how many people can view that video. The kind of potential for virality is infinite, essentially. And that's something which has always stopped me from going into video, because I don't know how to do it in the way that I want to. There's so many video creators I love.
Yeah.
And, I love Rob Martinez. I love Nicholas Nuvan. To be honest, they're all American. I don't actually like any of the British ones.
They're all here in New York. Yeah. Okay.
I feel that what they do is really using the medium to do something that writing can't. And they're doing it in a way that feels responsible.
They're in those communities. Like, they're not, like, Nick, for example, he's not Trini, but he's been doing so much Trini reporting that he basically has a Trini accent when he interviews people now. Like, even though they're not necessarily of that community, they are aware of the fact that they are reporting on a community.
Yeah, and I think the job he does is so important in a world which we're going down the same route as America. We're on the verge of probably a far right government. London's become like the bogeyman of the entire UK. To see someone cover the city with that amount of joy, to see someone cover the diversity of the city as a strength without any apology for it, I think that's such an important thing to do. It's something that food writing can do as well, although it doesn't do enough. And I would love to see that kind of video content in London. I would love to see it and support it. But I've often thought about, can I translate what I do with a review to video? And I think there is a way of doing it, but I've always held back. And I don't know whether it's to do with just being an old fogey when it comes to video and just an old man shaking at a cloud, or whether it just needs a bit more thought.
Well, also I wonder, I know that like a lot of critics, and probably yourself included, have a kind of complicated relationship with anonymity and like knowing what people look like or not. And I think the success of all of these video creators we're talking about is it's front-facing camera, like they're taking you along the journey. How much do you want to be anonymous?
Well, I'm not anonymous, to my annoyance, because I never thought that this would be my job ever. So, you can look, there's pictures of me around, but increasingly I don't show my face anymore.
You were not going to show your face for this episode.
Thank you. And my aim is to get fatter and balder so that all the photos of me will be hilariously out of date.
You're going to become Jonathan Gold.
Exactly, yeah.
But South Asian.
So, and the reason for that, there's plenty of reasons for that, but I think I want to, primarily among them, I want to avoid the parasocial relationships that being so public can bring up. It's incredibly powerful to, boost your own profile or boost your readership, but it's something that I've had and I don't want it. I think it's not conducive to good writing. So that's the primary reason. But no, I think if we ever did video, it'd be something, I don't know, like a Frederick Wiseman film or something much more process focused.
Yeah.
Much more focused on the actual people cooking the food and their stories. That's what interests me. And it feels like there might be a gap for that.
Yeah.
And to go back to what Rob does, that's, although he's in his videos kind of briefly, like they are all about process and people.
Yes, but if you say his name, like I can picture his face right now.
Yes.
He's still like your kind of way in. But I think I would like to see more of what you're talking about, and I think it doesn't have to happen right away, but maybe that's another thing Vittles can be thinking about down the line. And before we close today, just while we're talking about Vittles projects, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the print magazine that you guys released. What made you want to do something in print, and how did you kind of approach that medium differently?
Boredom, I think. We've been doing the same thing for 4.5 years. We're, a newsletter that operates through Substack, and that comes with its own set of limitations about what we can publish. It comes with its own limitations about, how artwork
The formatting
can be
is
used.
quite
And
annoying, honestly.
the format is very restrictive. And yeah, we wanted to see, well, what could we do even with old content, because issue 1 is a mix of old and new content, what we could do in the form of a magazine where, not every article has to like compete against each other, which is like the way that Substack is increasingly becoming. It's becoming a sort of social media site where every article has to compete. Like, every recipe has to compete now, and you're constantly thinking about metrics and read time and so on, and the fact that it often comes in your email, which is a place for most people of high stress. I get people coming up to me apologizing for not reading like the latest articles because they've got it kind of clogged up on their email. And so just to have something that, where there's no metrics, there's no algorithm, just something that people can read in their own time and at their own pace. And where not every article has to make a case for itself and to, put together a body of work. And it was really fun. It was really fun. And now I guess now that print has become a bigger part of what we do, our big thing is how do we demarcate between newsletter and print? It can't just be the stuff we love the most is in print, and then the newsletter is a lesser version of that. It has to be about, well, how does the format of the newsletter, or how does the format of print really benefit the article that we're working on? And I think what will probably happen is the newsletter will become slightly faster paced, and the magazine will become a place for slower pieces, which again don't need to have the pressure of like standing on their own.
Yeah.
So we're in the middle of putting together issue 2 right now, which will hopefully be out. Hopefully be out at the end of the year, which is nice. And it's themed as well.
Will you say the theme?
Yeah, it's bad food. As like working to a theme is very fun.
I do. We love a theme. I think when there's so much kinds of food content, and you do so many kinds of food content, to be able to narrow in and then expand out at the same time is kind of fun.
Yeah, and as I said, we get bored easily. And the first issue was very tasteful, I thought. The second issue is not going to be tasteful. I think it's going to be increasingly stupid and absurd, and maybe a slightly truer reflection of our sensibilities. Yeah.
Well, I'm excited about that, and I wish we could keep talking forever, but I'm going to do rapid fire with you to close. Are you ready?
Go on.
Okay. What you think is the best food city in the world?
It's a very boring answer. It probably is Tokyo, and it's annoying to say so, but it is.
That's fine. The best food neighborhood in London?
East Ham, which is an area in like I guess what would now be the true East End of London, which mainly has a South Indian diaspora, and is where one of the places that I first fell in love with food. It's where I first had food from Kerala, where I first had food in Tamil Nadu. It's one of the few places in London that when you get out at the train station, you do feel like you're transported somewhere. In the same way, when you get out of Flushing, you feel like you've been transported somewhere as well. A place which not enough Londoners go. But I would recommend to any New Yorkers coming to London, if you want to see something, see something that you might not get in New York, outside of, say, Jackson Heights, then East Ham would be the place.
Yeah, I've actually been to East Ham, and I think it's a special neighborhood, so I'll co-sign that. For the uninitiated, the difference between a caf and a cafe.
So I've been thinking about this. There's no hard and fast answer to this because it's all in the eye of the beholder. But a kind of answer to this is that both are places that serve casual food, but a caf is based around tea and a cafe is based around coffee. And then, that comes with all the kind of class connotations those things have. But, another answer would be that a caf is, a British version of a diner in the sense that it's mainly serving kind of breakfast food, mainly fried breakfast food, so sort of bacon, eggs, sausages with, additions of omelettes or sandwiches or things like that, but predominantly serving, a working class clientele, although, that is changing as well with, I guess, caf fetishism as well.
Yeah.
But it all comes from the fact that, people of my dad's generation just refuse to pronounce French names in the way they should do. Like he still says Nestles when it comes to Nestle, like a lot of that generation would do. So caf is a kind of bastardization of cafe.
Okay, your favorite caf?
My favorite caf is just the one closest to me, which is Crossroads Cafe. There's a very good chicken and scallop sandwich, which is like the unusual thing that they do. Like normally, like cafes have a repertoire of like only doing certain things, and that scallop sandwich is like an anomaly, and it's delicious. So I have like one every week or something.
Your favorite cafe?
I really love. I'm going to say Proof Rock Cafe, which is a very important coffee shop on Leather Lane. It was like one of the first, one of like the first truly great coffee shops that London had. It's now co-owned by James Hoffman, who I don't need to explain who that is. And it was one of the first places I fell in love with coffee as a tea person. Sort of really learning about how agriculture and cultural practices change the taste of coffee.
Something you order every time you see it on a menu?
Chicken and scallops, like all the time.
Your favorite bar in London?
I was going to say Long Island Bar to this one.
Okay.
No, my favorite bar, I really like a place called Bar with Shapes for its name. Oh. It's because like you see the name and it is just like shapes. It's like a red circle and blue triangle.
Everything they do is like
Bauhaus inspired, which means everything is super uncomfortable.
Yeah, I went there. I felt like I was in like a David Lynch movie or something. It was crazy.
But the drinks are great.
Yeah. Your favorite special occasion restaurant in London?
The Ritz.
Finally, a fictional food scene that you wish you could magically eat in real life.
All the food scenes from the Redwall series of books, which Vittles takes its name from. But yeah, they were always eating stuff like, well, to be honest, they sound like stuff like that is in any wine bar in London at the moment. Like these like huge pies and elderflower cordials and stuff like that. But I think those scenes have like been very influential on every British food writer over the last kind of 20 years or so.
Definitely. Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been so fun.
Thank you.
This is Taste is hosted and produced by Matt Rodbard and me, Eliza Abarbanel. The show is edited by lead producer Clayton Gumbert and supervised by Pat Stango, Director of Media Production and Development at Penguin Random House. Thanks to Shalia Harris and the production team at Penguin Random House. Theme music by Steve Rydell, logo and guest illustrations by Ellie Skurzat. Visit Taste online at tastecooking.com and make sure to subscribe to our newsletter to keep updated on all cool things in the world of taste.